But today we particularly wanted to talk about three misconceptions of cross-country riding, one of which is seeing astride. There are many, but these three we've chosen to talk about. One, seeing astride. Two, only training in good weather, can't possibly go out when it's raining. And three, what is the third one, Lucinda?
I can't remember.
I can't remember either.
We'll deal with two. We weren't going to write it down because we knew we'd have this happen.
I know what it is. I know what it is. It's basically when you go cross-country schooling, you've come out of the arena and you've arrived at this beautiful cross-country venue and you just think, I have to gallop now to train cross-country. So we're going to start. I
must just quickly interject because Rachel's blank was nothing like what happened to Spencer, Sturmey and I when we were commentating on the European Championships at Le Moulin on the Sunday morning of show jumping. We were standing in the water up to our knees in the water jump. No, sorry, it was the Saturday cross-country morning. And we were just discussing and we completely went blank on the name Chipmunk, which was the leading horse of Michael Young's. And I mean, we just looked at each other and burst into laughter, sort of collapsing towards the water. Oh. So these little mental blanks have not just tonight, they happen fairly frequently.
Yeah, and I think they're going to happen a lot going forward.
I'm going to start back to front because the seeing astride one is such a fascinating one. I want to kick off with that. But I want to kick off with the weather one because we've just been teaching in Yorkshire and it wasn't beautiful weather there, as you can imagine. And it's starting to get like that now. And my feeling is very strongly that however filthy the weather is, get out there and train because horses have got to get used to all the different feelings that they get from ground that changes. And I find rain driving into your face pretty off-putting. It's quite hard to see. And if you're unlucky enough to have to wear glasses or contact lenses, you really have a problem. So you need to find out when you're practicing, gosh, this was no good. I've got to find something else other than glasses and contact lenses because they didn't work. It's no good having formed up to your championships that's taken you years to qualify for and a heck of a lot of work to get to, and then find it's one of those days where it's horizontal rain. And it happened to my great mate, Ginny Holgate, Ginny Elliott, Ginny Lane, depending on how old you are as to what name you know her by, but really the best rider of her time. And she had a shocker fall on Welton Houdini, I think his name was, at fence 5 or 6 at Badminton, which was a big rails coming out of a sloping bit of ground. And she said to me later on, you know, I don't think I've ever ridden him in that sort of conditions. And so you don't want to wait till you get to your championships, because there is no choice. If it's raining, you go. And we're so spoiled with other events that if it's filthy weather, we don't have to run in them. There's probably another event next week. So get out there and practice in all conditions. I mean, sometimes it's snowing, and so long as the snow isn't settling, which makes it very slippery. Snow is another really difficult thing to deal with. It can come in little flurries, and Cheltenham can run in little flurries of snow, and so could an event. So get out there and brave it. So that would be one misconception. And I think also that applies to hard ground. People, oh, it's hard, I can't train. You need to train on hard ground. You just train a little bit less. You maybe jump a little bit less big. You maybe go a little bit less fast. But you need the horse to understand how to move across hard ground, how he'll slip on a turn when it's hard, unless he really looks after himself and you look after the turn. So there's lots of areas like that that need practice, really, because it's easy to avoid them, but don't, because as I say, your championships will be. So we got somebody else come on. Who Carol. We got there? Carol. Hello, Carol. Lovely to see you.
I rode today in the rain because you told us to.
Did I? Oh, you're very obedient. Well done. So that's lovely that you're already tuned into that. And having had to do a lot of teaching in the last 20, 30 years, you just grin and bear it. It's not great, but you just get on with it, because you never know if that's not going to be the day that your really important event is on with rain at horizontal angle. The next misconception,
before you say that, because the other thing was sometimes when you turn up at cross-country venues to train, or if you're out hacking and the ground's a bit rutted and hard, what would you say about that? Would you say don't train on that
Yes,
kind of ground?
I'm very keen that if the ground has become very rough and then hardened during the summer, I'm going to get out there and walk over it. I'm probably not going to go faster than a walk, but I want my horse's ankles to turn over. I want him to be able to accommodate all sorts of ground and not just go on an arena, a road, or a gallop. I want him to do what he's so brilliant at doing, which is being able to bend and twist and turn. And if you've been lucky enough, like I have for many, many years, to go on safari in Kenya, riding safari, and mostly on thoroughbred type horses, polo ponies, race horses, a few little special bush ponies, you learn just how incredible a horse is and how nimble and sure-footed, but they have done it all their lives, so they've got tendons like iron, and now they can gallop over these rutted, rocky, really quite difficult bits of ground. And one day we lost the whole lot because some buffalo came through the camp and frightened the horses, and they all pulled themselves off their line and galloped for about, I don't know, 7 or 8 miles to the next camp where they knew they'd be going in a couple of days' time over God knows what terrain. But then the really interesting thing was we had to go in the Land Rovers and get them back and ride them back through the most dangerous time, which is dusk, which is when the lions come out for their dinner. So it's all fun in Kenya. But that made me realize just how incredible horses were. But you need to do things with those legs. And I wouldn't be galloping over rutty tracks. I'd be walking.
And actually, Mick, Teresa Ann, she said, do you think training on different terrains helps the horse's bones and muscles toughen up? Which is just what you said. Yeah,
very good question. Yeah, we even got there without your prompt. Thank you. That was true.
And Hannah Pedley, she says, what's your opinion on studs in weather? Essential if wet, slippy, or depends on the horse?
They're a very, very good question, and it's something that we will talk about with considerable depth on our academy. But what I would like to say is that studs, if they work, stop the foot slipping. That is the idea of studs. Remember that nature gives the foot a natural slippage in order to absorb the jar that will go through the whole body if you don't allow that slippage to happen. So I'm very wary about overusing studs. I'm very wary about the 8 studs that I see 190 centimeter competitors putting in, and I'm thinking, you don't need studs at this age. The fences aren't big enough. They need to learn to slip and get out over the fence, and all the time that you put them in, you're creating a potential jar to the whole body of the horse, not just to his legs and his feet. So there are times when I think you really do need them, but I don't even put stud holes in the horses until they get to novice, because it's more money, isn't it? And they, you just have to go slow, and they have to learn how to deal with a slip. I don't want them to not know how to deal with a slip when they get to a higher level. I want them to know now over the smaller fences. So I would, if I had to, I'd put always only on the outside behind, and quite big maybe, but I'd never put on the inside because of cracking into the other leg with the inside of the stud. And front studs, my jury is still so out, because I've watched a high resolution slow-mo video of a front leg turning with no studs, 1 stud and 2 studs. With no studs, the hoof slipped and turned. With 1 stud, it turned. And with no studs, with 2 studs, it went round in a series of judders. Yeah. So I wouldn't want 2 studs in my front feet. However, that's for turning. When you're in a straight line, you want 2 studs so the foot goes down level. So you whichever one you choose, I end up thinking, well, I might just take out the inside stud, then it can't slice the other leg. But my jury is still out on that. I haven't really got to grips with it. Basically, when I was brought up, I was told, don't wear studs in front, because when you fall off, not if, when you fall off, the horse will put the studs all over your face. So we learned very early on, don't wear studs in front. But just occasionally, if it's really slippery, I think it's not a bad thing, but I don't put them too big.
But that probably, it's a never-ending question, the stud. We always
it's very different for show jumping. Very, very different. I mean, they do have 4 and 5 in 1 foot, but they've got 2 minutes and they can't afford 1 slip, because they'll lose that second and they'll lose the competition. So you can't compare the 2 sports, I don't think.
But I think training on grass without studs has got to be a good thing, hasn't it? Yeah. For the horses to get used to.
Try and pull a few jumps out onto the grass if you're used to just having it in an arena.
Okay. Right, so here we go. James Howardine, talking about whether competing on a very hot day, how would you deal with extreme heat, tuning a horse to it when the UK extreme heat doesn't happen often?
Yes, well, very, very luckily, you're absolutely right that we never get what horses have to have at certain Olympic Games and World Championships. I think what we've learned, and we've had a lot of experience with, Atlanta was the first one where they really started to take cooling a horse seriously, and then it moved on to Sydney, and I think Hong Kong was the next one they were terrified of, wasn't it? So they've done a lot, and really it's a little bit get the horse's body temperature down as quickly as you can. And unlike what we were taught when I was beginning, you never wash down with cold water because we might give them cramp. We always wash down with water that had the edge taken off it. So Dad used to bring up a container of hot water and add that to a bucket of cold. So that's how things have changed. Science has taken over. So now we have ice in the water. We wash them down. We don't even scrape it off. We just keep putting ice water on, ice water on, ice water on. And at the same time, we've got the ice on the legs for, I think, a maximum, I think it's 14 minutes now. Next year it'll be 15, and the year after that it'll be 12. But apparently you want to just get the legs cold and close up all the vessels, and then you take the ice off and the blood will come rushing back. And apparently this is what's going to help the bruising and the problems in the legs. But it's a great question, and ice all the way, it seems.
Okay, so when you turn up to cross-country school, okay, you a lot of people feel, I run a venue where we have cross-country training, and I see people come and they don't really have a plan. They think, right, it's cross-country, I've just got to gallop fast at these fences. I think people don't realise that there's an awful lot of training that you can do at lower gears.
Yes, it's a very interesting misconception that. Rachel had a hunter trial the other weekend, which is just cross country with no eventing, no dressage, and a couple of the people that just were told by mum and dad, I think, to follow the blue numbers. They hadn't
yellow.
They hadn't even walked the course, and so off they went as fast as they could. But it's not very easy when you're just following numbers and you don't know where you're going. So there's a few sort of misconceptions on those lines too. But I think what I love about cross country is it's an art and a science. And so is dressage, and so is show jumping. And sometimes I think cross country gets left off the end because you just sit down and you kick and you don't fall off if you can help it, and you gallop off to the next one. But there's such a fascinating art to it. There's such a fascinating science. And that's what grips me. I would love to be gripped by dressage the same way. And I'm still hoping as I get older that I might get gripped by dressage. Show jumping, I think I've been left behind. But that's my failing, not show jumping's failing.
I don't know. I saw you jump at Wellington on one of Lissa's horses, and it was amazing.
It's quite a nice horse, that. Yeah. Despite me.
Anyway, I think that's a load of nonsense. She's a very good show jumper, obviously.
Well, over the years, you learn that you do need hind legs under you when you're going in a smaller arena. It's much easier across country to have your hind legs under you because you've got that sort of forward speed to move. But anyhow, we spend a lot of time, especially with the baby horses, walking over mini jumps, and there's some wonderful places around here that have a little field of mini jumps, and we just walk over them, and then we trot over the same fences that they've walked over, and these sort of shock horror little sort of jumps they've done at walk, then they start, oh, this is easy when I'm trotting, and then we might even, they're usually a bit too small to canter over. But then when we've done those baby ones in walk, the next time we come, we'll probably move, forget the baby ones and walk and go straight onto the trot fences, which would probably be barely 2 foot, 1'6", 2 foot, and they trot everything. And the good thing about trot is they have time, and they find it much harder to refuse because they've only got one hind leg on the ground at once. So they've got half the power pistons to jam on the anchors or run out. So trotting is great. They have lots of time. They can use their head and necks, provided you're a rider who doesn't use the reins as handlebars. Got to be able to ride the bike without hands if you want to cross-country ride. I love trotting. I think you have to accept that you're going to look awful. It's a very odd pace to jump out of, and if you're not careful, you'll get ahead of the movement because you're trying so hard not to get left behind. Just get left behind. Don't worry about it. Just make sure your fingers allow the reins to go so that the horse doesn't get jabbed in the teeth as he lands. And then eventually, once we've trotted a bit, we'll do the same fences we've trotted on the young horses in canter, and we'll let them find their way. We'll just make sure they stay in and that they stay wanting to jump, and then they find their way, they find their spot. And sometimes it's pretty ugly, you know, they sort of canter into the bottom over the top. But then that's them learning, isn't it? That's them learning, gosh, I'm going to have to back myself off, or that's going to be an uncomfortable situation next time. And they do. They learn so quickly. But we as riders have got to have the understanding of our job, which is to show the horse the fence, to make sure he keeps coming to it, not fast, just doesn't try and back off and run away. And then he's got to sort out his takeoff spot and get us over the fence. I think if any of you ever try to jump ditches, which we always do in walk first and then trot and then canter, you cannot look good over a ditch, and you just accept that before you start, because if you do look good over a ditch, you've got in front of the movement, and that's when the horse will probably say, I'm not jumping that hole.
I tell you, that's music to my ears. I mean, I don't ride so much anymore, but when I was younger, I used to always worry about what I look like and, oh, am I doing it well? And everything's got to look perfect. And actually, I think it'd be interesting to see everybody that's on here, just maybe put in the comments, is that a relief for you to hear? Just say yes, hell yes.
Hell yes.
If that's a relief to hear that you do not need to look perfect, and it's all right to make mistakes when you're training. I think a lot of people will be really relieved to hear that. So
yes, I have a little saying, I say ugly is good. And fascinatingly enough, because I do
Carol, yes.
Oh, good. Well done.
Well
I do
Carol.
quite a lot of training, and by the time I've finished trying to help them understand the simplicity of where I'm coming from, most of them look extremely good, but not because they're trying to, but because they're just putting into play the fundamentals that they need to have to make sure the horse gets a chance to see the fence and gets a chance to jump it.
D. Oakley, any tips on cross-country schooling? I find it really hard jumping from cold blood and end up holding on too tight. But I think what you've just said there about slowly building up in trot.
Don't jump big.
Yeah.
Just stay jumping until you're bored of jumping the height that you're jumping, and then you'll think, I might just do something a bit bigger now. And don't ever say, I'm just going to try something a bit bigger. Do it.
Yeah. That's such good. I'm writing that down. Don't try it, do it.
Yes, don't try it, do it. But build yourself up. Everybody has their own way of dealing with fear. Most people have fear. And build yourself up, and remember that what you're trying to develop is a partnership, is a love affair between you and your horse. And it's that incredible strength of relationship that can take you to the edge of the world and help you defeat the challenges, because ultimately it's the course designer against the competitor.
Like you and Be Fair.
Absolutely. And that I had him as a 15-year-old. I was 15, and it was a heck of a journey to get from there to the Olympic Games. And it took 7 years of a lot. He started me writing, because his story was so extraordinary that I wrote a book called Up and Away, which I thought was the most dreadful title, but my publishers insisted on it. I wanted to call it Over the Moon, and they said, that's a cow. Cow jumped over the moon. Anyhow, it's a most wonderful journey, this developing the trust.
I'm going to read that. I haven't read that. And I said to Lucinda the other day that we must, now that everybody reads things on iPads and Kindles and so on, I think we should re-release that book.
I would
hands
love
up,
it to
who
be.
wants to see it re-released?
I would love to do it.
This is convincing. I think it can be done. Yes, lots of.
Yeah, I'd love to do it, because I wrote it because I wanted everybody to learn all that I had learned from this extraordinary horse we bought out of the Horse and Hound at 5 for £550. And that was a long time ago. That was 1968. And I learned so much from those 7 years that we had together that and it also was one of those extraordinary stories that goes through highs and lows. And at the very top of his career, it went woof. And you have to read the book to know what that was. But it was heartbreaking, but sort of encapsulated the most incredible embodiment of learning. And it was that started me writing, because I wanted to show other people not to give up. Things went wrong, don't give up. And this little horse was just absolutely my love, complete love.
And that's what Lucinda wants to get across in our academy, that when things go wrong, you can learn from them rather than thinking it's the end of your world. You think, right, how can I make this better? Every
failure is a learning opportunity. It's jolly hard to accept that. And it's particularly hard if you ride horses for other people, because you feel you're disappointing them. It's so much easier if you own your own horse, because you're only disappointing yourself. But the pressure comes on in spades when you're trying to please somebody else. And if they understand horses, they'll run with you. But sometimes they're just wanting to see the the red rosette, and that is really tough.
How do you stop yourself seeing the stride for the horse? So that brings us neatly on to our next topic.
The misconception that you have to see a stride to ride safely across country.
And I have to say, when I heard this, I was very relieved. This was very nice to know that it was completely normal that I could never see a stride when I was riding.
It's a well-divided subject, and I have complete respect for people who have a very, very good eye and can always see a stride. I couldn't, and my greatest help in my training originally was Dick Stillwell, and then moved on to Pat Burgess, who was probably the underpinning of all my, if you needed a sports psychiatrist, I didn't, because I had Pat, and she had an incredible way with people and understanding people. But she recognized very early on that I had no eye for a stride. So she taught me the benefit of what she called a medium length canter, what I call the quality of canter. And if the quality of canter is right, and Chris Bartle, who's probably the best cross-country trainer in the world, will back me up every time, the quality of canter is right, the horse has the option to find his own takeoff spot. But the quality of canter must be right, which means you've got to make sure he's engaging his engine. So simply put, there are two things that really matter as a rider that you enable your horse to do coming to a fence. He must see the fence that he's going to jump, because sometimes there's quite an array of fences, or he's busy looking at the fence judge's car, or spooking at a dog running, or there's so many things that he might have his eye on other than the fence that you want him to jump. So your job is to learn, and that is a learning process, how to focus your horse. It's not a word focus we ever really used in the good old days. It wasn't a question of whether your horse has seen the fence or not. It was whether he was big enough, brave enough to go down to the size of these damn things. So it is a new age thing, having to focus a horse. But once you've made sure he understands where he's going, if you've got him in that quality of canter, which means he's wanting to take the fence on, he's got the desire, which means his hind legs will be coming through, and then your job is just to control that desire and keep him in the pace that you know, or you learn, that is safe for that type of fence. So if it's a coffin, an unseen fence on the landing, you're very, very slow, so he has time to read it. And the other end of the scale is a steeplechase fence, and he's moving on really fast, and then all the gears in between. But if you can get him to see it and to want it, desire it, and then you regulate that desire, you've got what you need of quality of canter. And then he has the option to go in deep if he needs to have another look, or I can do this, and to stand off. So my whole sort of thesis is that I want my horse to think for himself whilst listening to me. And that's what they call a paradox, a double opposite. And I think probably I developed that saying, if you like, my horse must think for himself whilst listening to me. Because over the years of teaching and riding, I realized that's what I did. I told him what I wanted, but I didn't take away his ability to think for himself, because that is the greatest safety belt I have, is his initiative. And what I feel has happened in the last probably 20 years is people have become more and more technical, because the courses have become narrower and narrower, and more angles and more this. And so they are getting the horses to listen to their every command, including where their horse should take off. And that initiative, I'm inclined to feel, is, once it's lost, you haven't got the safe conveyance that you have when a horse's initiative is shone. I like to shine his initiative so that he can use it. And that's not to say, as the wonderful Ginny Elliot Lang Holgate said in my ear some years ago, she said, if you see a lovely stride coming into a fence, ride to it. If you don't see anything, sit up and keep your leg on. And I thought that is so beautifully embodying how you don't need to see the stride every time. You see it, wonderful, ride to it. You don't, sit up, keep your leg on, and the horse will take the option of doing a little one or coming off if he feels like it.
I think some of you might know that we've created an online academy for cross-country riders, and within that academy we've bottled Lucinda's training methods. It's something that I wanted to do, and it was quite hard to figure out how, and then suddenly it became clear. And it's all of these trainings that that she does with all of her students, don't you, week in, week out, that are teaching the horse to think for himself while listening to us. And I'm lucky enough because Lucinda's helped my daughter hugely with her cross country. I mean, she's actually a reasonably good cross country rider.
She's a very good rider, and she said something absolutely wonderful only yesterday on a text. And I hadn't done anything to help her at Bicton except we'd had a giggle on the text about a coffin fence. But she wrote to thank me, and she said, until I met you, I didn't enjoy cross country that much. And I thought, gosh, we must work on this, and we must find out exactly why she didn't enjoy it, because she had some good education and some good trainers. And I thought, well, that's wonderful, because there's so much heartache with horses, so much goes wrong. We reckon it's 9 bad to 1 good out of 10, that you've got to enjoy it. It's got to be fun. And I think if you love it, it intoxicates your horse. I've only ever had 1 horse, well, actually jolly nearly 2. The last one I had was nearly another one that didn't absolutely love cross country. And it's such a wonderful thing when you can feel them wanting it as much as you.